Okay, well, listen, Jessica, it's so great to have you, a bit of your time for this really just sort of casual conversation to learn a little bit about you, more about you and your exciting work. So I wanted
Thank
to
you.
start with the first question, which is, how did you become involved in climate work? And maybe share just something from your journey that wouldn't be something we would otherwise see on your bio or your CV.
Well, I was born and raised in Kenya. I was born in Kakamega, just in the western part of the country. And growing up, I kind of just grew up as a normal kid. But then I did my bachelor's in meteorology, and being trained as a climate scientist really kind of brought me into the real world. I wasn't sure what climate science could do, but I still did it. But then after that, I started thinking about how can we advance the use of climate science? And so I started doing a bit of work on climate change. I did some work with on communicating climate information, and that's how I started slowly progressing into work on climate change and development. And for my PhD, I decided to look at climate justice because my work in sub-Saharan Africa had it helped me understand that how we're doing development was very disjointed from what people actually needed, and I needed to learn more about how to do development in a way that was in alignment with with the needs and priorities of people, and that's how I ended up in climate change.
Well, thank you. I'm curious about sort of some of these big questions you're exploring in your research right now. Could you share a little bit more about where sort of you're focusing your time in your role with Oxford Net Zero?
So I am personally interested in understanding how we can deliver climate justice to countries in the global south, and not just countries. I'm thinking about communities, thinking about municipalities, thinking about households in the global south, especially those who are poor and marginalized, those who are unable to access resources to adapt to climate change. And for me, I think that's my main starting point. And I think one way we can deliver climate justice is ensuring that they have the capacity and resources they need to respond to climate change risks. And net zero is coming up as a very big framework for for identifying, but also for advancing climate action. And my interest in all this, and as part of the my work in the initiative, will be to look at how can we make net zero more inclusive to countries in the global south. How do we bring them in to make them part of the conversation about how do we shape, how should net zero be shaped? How could it be shaped to make sure that it delivers their needs and their priorities? But also beyond that, I'd like to know how the net zero framework can be useful for those communities, for those households, for those groups in the global south, how it can benefit them, but also how it can help them to transition towards a more sustainable future.
Oh, I'm so excited to see more about your research and sort of where and how the sort of lines of inquiry and what you learn. I think many people are going to be really excited to sort of keep their eyes on what you're uncovering and how you're sharing it. Um, well, so I wonder in that spirit, when you think about net zero and in particular how it's sort of evolving in different parts of the world, I mean, I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on how you think this research you're doing could be enabled or applied by business and the business sector.
Businesses are very critical, in my opinion. We need to work with businesses to make that transition. And learning about what inclusiveness means for net zero will help them, will help them map the path to net zero. Because if they get it wrong, it means that a lot of people will be stuck in systems that systems that are not aware of their needs, or systems that do not cater to their priorities. And so working with businesses means that businesses can address these needs, but also businesses can create environments where these people are able to fulfill their welfare needs. They're also able to engage in a society that is more equitable.
Well, and I wonder if I can ask you a bit of a follow-up question on this, because if you were to imagine one company or one industry that you would most like to work with to adopt and sort of apply your research, which company or which industry would that be and why?
This is, I think, for me, it is, if I were to work with them, I think it would be governments. And I think government, especially in the global south, governments are businesses. and and they decide, they have a very huge influence on how work is done. And I know a lot of people work with government, but I think there's still something that we haven't figured out when working with government, and that's how to bring them on board into a framework where they are able to deliver more public goods at costs that are at costs that fit that fit the audience, and the audience in this case are citizens in developing countries. And so I don't think I'll be able to do this in my lifetime, but finding a more effective way to work with government.
Okay, interesting. I think that idea of power and influence that you shared, like where are the sources of influence, is super important and important to reflect on. Well, let me sort of take a slightly different track here, because I'd like to hear where you see things going next in the work that you're doing. What are sort of some of the most exciting sort of trends or sort of trajectories you're seeing happening right now, especially as we are sort of on the countdown to COP26?
I think so far we have a lot of people talking about net zero, and so and that interest, we have people who are all pro net zero, and we have people who are really anti net zero, and there are others who are in the middle who are really ready to fall on either side. They just need more evidence, and that is a really good thing. So COP26 is giving us that opportunity to have these conversations, and that is something that I'm really looking forward to. And so for the next few months, my team and I will be looking at the opportunities to just sit and listen, to hear people's concerns about net zero, to just see where this conversation will go in the run up to the COP, but after the COP, but also after the COP for the net zero, the inclusive aspect of net zero. We'll be thinking about where is everybody at in relation to net zero. What are they thinking? What's preventing them from reaching a certain level? What's preventing them from progressing? And then we will meet them wherever they are and start working with them to help them envision a more inclusive, version or more inclusive approach to net zero.
Oh, terrific. Well, I want to ask a little bit more now about you, Jessica, if I may, because your story and the work you're doing is just so extraordinary. Where do you go to get your inspiration? Where do you go to get sort of fired up and get the energy to do this really important work? Is there a particular kind of music you listen to, or cooking that you like to do? I'm just curious a little bit about more about you, Jessica, and again, like where you go to recharge and find inspiration.
I like hiking, actually. It's something that I haven't been able to do much, especially in my very early years. But then since coming to the UK, there's very nice spaces you can go hiking, walking safely, actually. And I do that quite a lot when I can. Another thing I do is just travel. Before I could hike, I just used to travel, just get out and go to a new place, find a very, very nice place to sit and just enjoy the scenery, enjoy the landscapes. And that really helps me. And mostly, I think the travel and the hiking reminds me of home. And since I've been away from home for a while, it's just, being reminded of the people that made you, the people you grew up with, is a really good motivation, because it reminds you why you're doing these things.
Oh, I'm going to think about that actually when I go on my next hike, and think about where I come from and my home. I haven't seen my family in a while too. And I think finding those places to reflect and think about those who we don't necessarily get to see all the time, but who are part of our journey is really important. And maybe hopefully we can go for a hike together at some point soon, Jessica, here in the UK. My last question for you actually is, we're hoping that quite a few young people and students who are studying at Oxford are going to listen in to some of these sort of coffee conversations. And I wondered if there's any advice that you would give to young people who are interested in some of the themes that you're exploring in your research. Where would you suggest they go to learn more or get more involved?
One thing I did as a young person was to just reach out to people, email them. There's a lot of people out there really happy to engage on those things. And so if you think that person X is talking about something you're interested in, reach out to them. But also, I think young people are, I studied physics in my undergraduate, and young people are potential energy. And if you just push them a bit, they will become a very huge force. And so I think you can find energy amongst yourselves. And so form a group, talk about these things, think about how to make these ideas, agendas move forward, and take it to the COP, find ways of getting engaged in the COP. And this COP will be mostly about young people. And so find opportunities through your university, through your representatives, how can you get engaged in the COP? And also, if you're interested in what I'm talking about, please do reach out. I'd be happy to talk about it.
Well, that is a very warm and very generous and kind invitation, and some really exceptionally good advice for students. Well, thank you very much for your time, Jessica. This has been a great conversation. And I know we're all super excited to see more about your research and see it put into practice on the road to COP26 and, of course, beyond. So thank you, Jessica.
Thank you.